lies in ruins. The unseen and omnipotent announcer has promised that the victor of a series of races will be allowed into the winner's circle of utopia, a legendary paradise that is the last bastion of humanity on the scorched planet. The wacky racers and their sentient vehicles compete for survival as they speed through an apocalyptic desert filled with radioactive lakes, nanotech dust storms, and cannibalistic mutants. There's only room for one winner, and anybody in second place will be left to die in the wacky Raceland. Hello everyone, I'm Stephanie Sterling, and I only just learned that Hanna-Barbera Wacky Raceland is a thing. Now, I was going to be talking about this anyway, because it's amazing. During the apocalypse, Dick Dastardly left his wife and child to be torn apart by a nanostorm. But it actually turns out that this is something of a pertinent thing to bring up, because this is the kind of dribbling wet shit that issues forth from the brains of executives. That's Penelope Pitstop now. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Unity this week. Obviously, we are, because Unity has really fucking stepped into it. By the way, hello to the Unity employees, those of whom I've been told are quite big fans of mine. Especially those who've reached out to me. I do hope that this, along with the ocean of other coverage, proves somewhat cathartic. Unity, as a company, can eat heartily from a rusty vat of long-dead, decayed dicks. All of them. All of the corpse cocks.
I've got the perfect snack that puts all those things together. A dinosaur-sized
wang doodle.
I realise this is a rather puerile sentiment, mayhap not the genus of verbiage one anticipates from a show typified by superincumbent prolixity and a vocabulary of nigh amaranthine heterogeneity, yet nonetheless, Unity's executives can grab every bruised, withered, necrotic dick on the menu and chow the fuck down. The game engine of choice for a vast number of big-budget studios, independent developers, and talentless asset-flipping con merchants alike, Unity lies at the centre of one of the biggest industry controversies in recent memory, the company going from relatively inoffensive purveyor of popular software to rightly detested target of ridicule and scorn practically overnight. For at last, the inevitable and the unethical happened. Unity announced plans to start charging game developers using the engine an additional fee every single time their game is installed. Yes, you heard that right. It's a stunning display of utterly egregious entitlement, as Unity wants an ill-gotten share of more than just a game's sales, believing itself deserving of even more money per computer it's on. Jesus. The so-called Unity Runtime Fee was announced last Tuesday and has been a glorious PR nightmare ever since. Terrible communication, walkbacks, a continued need for clarifications and re-clarifications, as well as a massive outcry from game developers and players alike.
What's the right context for, and I quote,
Come on, give me the cash!
That's a great question.
The ballad of the Runtime Fee has not only been a delicious nosedive in its own right, but the provider of valuable historical context, demonstrating as it does the inevitable disaster you get when a business is run by short-sighted grifters so obsessed with profit they're ignorantly out of touch with everything else. The runtime fee will kick in after certain numerical thresholds, as one might expect. The standard starting rate for Unity Personal and Unity Plus will be 20 cents per installation, and occurs after a game has 200,000 installs and made $200,000 in a 12-month period. For Unity Pro and Enterprise, those threshold numbers become 1 million apiece. The announcement blog is couched in all manner of minutiae, potential exemptions, qualifiers, assurances, and fucking dribble, but those are the basics. As if that wasn't bad enough, the runtime fee was also revealed to be applicable retroactively, as in, Unity wants to charge for games that have already been made, despite the fact they were made under very different terms of service. The initial announcement left too many questions unanswered because those who came up with this shit clearly hadn't thought things through enough to anticipate the large litany of issues and conflicts their stupid scheme threw up. Some of the largest concerns included what happened to games that are in bundles or giveaways, which could see a lot of game installations without the developer making direct sales. Similarly, what would it mean for titles available via services like Game Pass? Unity has since clarified that games in bundles are exempt, while Microsoft would be the one charged for games installed via Game Pass. It also had to promise the runtime fee won't apply to reinstalls, only fresh ones. You know, the kind of information that anybody fucking sensible would have anticipated and answered ahead of time. We're not exactly dealing with the veiniest dildos in the bottom drawer, though. I don't know where that analogy came from. All of this, however, turns attention to perhaps the biggest question of all. How will Unity even know how many times a game's installed? How will it tell the difference between the bundles, subscriptions, and direct sales? How will it tell legitimate official sales from, say, piracy, or key resellers, or just trolls faking mass installs to harass developers? Well, here's Unity's answer.
Trust in me.
Questions aside, the basic situation is disgusting as all hell. No matter what conditions and softeners Unity tries to apply, the foundational fact is that Unity wants to be paid whenever a game's installed on somebody's computer, literally getting money for nothing as the executives just sit on their bone-idle shit pillows and skim cash off the top of a transaction it already made money from. It's the exact kind of cynically planted money tree game publishers have dreamed of ever since Bethesda started selling horse armor. The backlash has been almost universal. You can count on one fingerless hand the amount of developers who've come out in favour of the plan. Among the unfavourable responses is one from Slay the Spire dev Megacrit, who offered, "The retroactive pricing structure of runtime fees is not only harmful in a myriad of ways to developers, especially indies, it is also a violation of trust. We believe Unity is fully aware of this, seeing as they have gone so far as to remove their terms of service from GitHub. Despite the immense amount of time and effort our team has already poured into development on our new title, we will be migrating to a new engine unless the changes are completely reverted and TOS protections are put in place. We have never made a public statement before. This is how badly you fucked up." Oof. Ouch. Other devs have already said that even if Unity does what Megacrit rightly wants, the trust has been so irretrievably flushed down the toilet, they'll never use Unity again. Over 100 studios to date have released statements condemning the scheme. We believe Unity has made a grave misstep in introducing a poorly thought out fee mechanic and then compounded that threefold by making it apply to games that have already been released, said Darkest Dungeon creator Red Hook. It is hard to imagine us building another game with Unity unless we know we are protected from the possibility of massive changes to how we pay for that technology being introduced at the whims of executive management. Part of game development is knowing when a mistake is not working and then having the courage to swallow your ego and undo the mistake. We call on Unity to recant this blunder. Toem's developer, Something We Made, described the fee in no uncertain terms. This would mean that too many people installing Toem could challenge our survivability, which is outrageous and straight up backwards. It would be like if YouTube started charging creators for each of their views or fine you each time your friends watched your silly unlisted videos. It's absurd, mate. Look, I know y'all are angry, but please don't give YouTube any ideas. You fucking know any Google boss hearing that just creamed their jeans. The YouTube mention is, however, quite apt. As someone who's had the misfortune of working with, or rather in spite of, YouTube as a platform for over 9 years now, I can tell you that the atmosphere of mistrust and anxiety these sudden changes inspire severely damage one's ability to feel secure and happy, which is kind of a useful way to feel as an artist. I know tortured artists are a thing, but that's normally like inner turmoil and shit, not YouTube being a cunt. I've been around a long time, seen the many horrible changes YouTube sprung on creators without consultation or even the slightest warning, from running their little experiments on select channels without telling them, to sweeping policy changes that have serious implications for how creators produce their content and make money from the platform. YouTube considers those most affected by its ham-fisted, seemingly whimsical decisions to be the last ones who need to know about them. I get a sense of cold, fucking dread now when I see an email from YouTube in my inbox. Most of the time it's some inane borderline spam from the fuckers, but I don't know if it'll be something worse. Some new policy to worry about, some fraudulent accusation of violating community standards that have been vaguely defined and inconsistently applied and enforced. I don't trust YouTube. In fact, they've left me permanently paranoid, and the platform itself is one of the most stressful aspects of my job, easily in the top 3 aspects most damaging to my mental health. Right behind that little dent in my top hat that I can't quite smooth out. Only the biggest and most successful YouTubers get to feel any shred of security, and that's also quite pertinent to the Unity situation. After all, who won't really feel the pinch from a 20-cent install fee? Major multi-billion-dollar publishers whose level of success equates to such dizzying levels of wealth that one of their executives could single-handedly pay the fee out of pocket and not feel the sting, let alone the obscenely rich company itself. Of course, that's always the rub, isn't it? What is it they say about, like, speeding fines? If you're so rich you can pay it without feeling it, it's not a fine for speeding, but a fine for being poor? I've been thinking about the gross inequality of finance-based penalties a lot when I've seen this whole situation unfold and listened to Unity's excuses. Only 10% of devs will be affected, claim Unity, using the same justification its big publisher brethren uses to excuse microtransactions, as if a small number of people impacted somehow make doing a shitty thing okay. I mean, Tory policies that attack minority groups only affect a small number of people doesn't stop them being the domain of cruel pieces of shit with human rights allergies. But more directly, imagine being in the position of hoping you're not so successful that you can't afford it. Caught in the horrible sour spot of successful, but not so successful you're employing executives for millions of dollars a pop. That's basically what Unity is doing here. It's implemented a policy that's fine if you don't make the 200,000 threshold, but if you cross it, you start getting fucked. Unless you're already so wealthy that charges won't make a dent. Like something we made said, every install takes a game so much closer to an unsurvivable situation. That kind of fear is not the basis of a healthy, mutually beneficial relationship. It's a tale we've heard 1,000 times. A once unassuming company getting utterly fucking greedy or utterly fucking desperate and taking it all a step too utterly fucking far. It's the grimly inevitable destination of any corporation that grows, especially once the vampiric executive class gets its foot in the door and start to fill leadership roles with overpaid and underwhelming upward failures who stay in power not because they're good at their alleged jobs, but because the people working under them for a lot less money happen to be good at theirs, while the smarmy pricks in charge were quote-unquote managing them. Unity CEO John Riccitiello is perceived by many as lying, literally and figuratively, at the heart of the controversy. After all, this is the former boss of Electronic Arts. Whoever saw that company at the peak of its cashing in its credibility to become the disgusting purveyor of exploited property and gambling games sold to minors that it is nowadays. Riccitiello is the man who floated the idea of a first-person shooter where you charge players real money to refill their guns' ammo. It's been quite fun seeing younger people just discovering that little nugget. Riccitiello is the man who had to publicly apologise for calling game developers some of the biggest fucking idiots, a sentiment he clearly believes since he said it in the first place, and it really sheds light on the company's attitude as it tries to charge those alleged morons for the audacity of having their games installed by the people who bought them. How dare they? Riccitiello has had a massive leaky bonk-on for microtransactions ever since Mass Effect 3 helped them barge into full-price games way back in 2012. His lust for freemium action is shared by Unity overall, especially when it comes to this runtime fee. It's since come out that the fee's allegedly been positioned to lure mobile free-to-play developers over to the engine from its competitors, since Unity's been promising a 100% fee waiver to anyone who defects from its biggest rivals in the mobile space, such as AppLovin. Unfortunately for Unity, mobile developers have been no more in love with the runtime fee than anyone else, with hugely successful studios in the space undersigning an open letter, pledging to boycott the move by turning off ads. Oops! Some have pointed out that it's not fair to put so much blame on John Riccitiello for all this. I think it's fair to do anything that hurts a CEO's feelings, and the richer they are, the more fair it is. However, there are some other pompous assholes at Unity who can shoulder the blame. Tomer Bar-Zeev is one such exec, the founder of Iron Source, which was acquired by Unity in 2022. Unity was already in the doghouse after tying itself to this monetization company, which just so happens to have a history of developing malware. I can't imagine Imagine Unity being involved with software that you install in good faith, only to find that it's put you in a position where you're fucked. Oh wait, that's what the Unity engine is now. There's been plenty of blame thrown at Iron Source and the smooth brains behind it for Unity's current woes, but I say there's a metric clit ton of blame to go around. Feel free to smear it all over Iron Source, but rest assured, you've still got enough to spray directly into the face of John Riccatello, like a hippo jettisoning shit at max speed through its rapidly fanning tail, like it does in clips that I'm sure we'll pixelate just in case you're eating your lunch. Then again, we've already been using photos of Riccatello, so you might have thrown up several times already. Unity isn't profitable. That's a thing worth remembering. It makes billions, but it doesn't make profit, i.e. the money on top of its revenue that's stolen from workers to go directly into the pockets of investors and the feeble leadership. Like I said earlier, what we're seeing here is what happens anytime a big public company in this pathetic industry faces a real test of leadership. The test is failed. Almost without fail, because they couldn't conceive taking a meaningful non-performative cut to their own massive paychecks, bonuses and associated perks, they engage in mass layoffs, which Unity has done, and desperately attempt to squeeze more milk from the udders they're already wringing dry, as Unity is trying to do now. The executive class doesn't have any other ideas than the ones they've been doing ever since they backstabbed and ass-licked their way up the corporate ladder eons ago. I've said before, confidently and correctly, that I am smarter than the average game executive. I am. So are you, actually. Whoever you are watching this now, you're smarter and better and more dignified. Even if you're a pathetic, crawling little sub, more at home in a cage than in people clothes, you still have more backbone and are more worthy of my respect than some besooted turnip in a suit far smarter than he is. And I didn't contrive that sentence just to get to someone who made the mistake of saying my dommy jokes did things to them. Wink wink, darling. But my use of this video to self-servingly flirt aside, what I mean to say is, as I've said before, these people are out of bloody touch. Any fucking rifle who's spent 5 minutes talking and listening to game developers, rather than write them off as fucking idiots, could have predicted that none of them would accept Unity's proposal. Anybody who understands the game industry at even a basic level would be able to tell you that blindsiding and alienating creators with fees that actively punish success was going to upset not just them but their audiences. At the very least, anybody with sapience above the level of a fucking squirrel would understand that such controversial changes, suddenly dropped into the laps of roughly half of the game industry, would need to be communicated clearly, rigorously, and tightly clad in iron, rather than dribbled out with open questions in ill-defined, confusing blog posts. I said it's a tale we've heard before. The fact we have heard it many times ought to be fucking shocking. The fact we'll hear it again is fucking disgraceful. But this is an industry full of imbeciles who are so privileged they literally don't understand how their single-minded, single-celled visions for tomorrow burn the people who live day to day. Sadly, these buffoons have remained in charge for longer than I've been covering their buffoonery, and they'll be buffooning around long after I've stopped. They're protected from their own stupidity because the shit pouring from their mouths inevitably rolls downhill and covers everybody but them in the stink. Little boys playing grey-haired grown-ups like John Riccatello will continue to sleaze, lie and corrupt their way to the top of the industry, while their prehistoric, childlike, ignorant methods, layoffs, fees, perpetual passing of the buck, will thrive even as everything else they touch withers and dies, like the dicks Unity can go and fucking eat.
It's the extra poo that makes all the difference.
Professor Pat Pending runs like unethical, cruel experiments on people, just injects people with bad fluids. Anyway, hope you liked today's video. Obviously, I do have to point out that there's been the usual harassment on social media of Unity employees, many of whom completely disagree with the decisions made by leadership. I have been told by those at Unity that some of the leaders were making them post on social media in favour of the runtime fee, and they got harassed as a result, which sucks. Don't do it when it comes to issuing threats and dogpiling and abuse. Obviously, the criticism needs to be reserved for those at the top who are rolling the shit downhill. Don't start dumping on those who have already been dumped on. The Red Baron is in this now. They changed his name to the Red Baron and he's a fucking Nazi. Thank God for me.